Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1,400. Woof! 1,400 of these things. The topic is nutrition and the title is Controlling Hunger Levels. Awesome. Well, this will be a good topic today. So it is our 1,400th topic. There was one way back when where I did 4 parts, and I called it, say the certain number, 1,400 part 1, 1,400 part 2. So that kind of threw off my total number count. So I think I've done 1,404 or something like that. But pretty cool to now have done 1,400 days of podcast. That's a lot of content. I hope that if you've been with us for a while, I hope it's been beneficial. We've had a lot of stories of people using just the podcast itself to really make some amazing changes in their life, whether that's, physical health or even mental and emotional health. I get a lot of those emails about how people just feel more in control of their nutrition, and then they feel more in control of their body, their image, what they can do to adjust for that, their self-discipline. I mean, it's just amazing. It's really awesome to know the physical changes that are changing for people and the emotional, mental changes that are, happening for people. I really appreciate everybody reaching out. Thank you for all your encouragement, and I hope that you continue to find this helpful. Cool. Well, today's podcast, we're going to talk about controlling hunger levels, and this comes up quite often with clients. I do a nutrition coaching kind of in part with all my online clients, so we do kind of training and nutrition combined. Now, for nutrition, it differs depending on the person, but commonly how we kind of approach it is we look at tracking and kind of controlling calories first, then protein, then kind of the timing and distribution of our calories and protein. Then we get into, am I eating enough carbs or enough fats, or, how much do I know is enough of those things? Then we talk about kind of smaller details in regards to specific food choices. Should I have white rice or brown rice? And what is the difference? We might have been told that brown rice is better, but actually for some people it's not. It causes bloating. It causes them to be not hungry enough for their next meal. It messes up their total caloric intake. So they're actually better off eating white rice. So there's a lot of individual variabilities to food, but hopefully in our podcast you can always learn kind of the basics, get a bunch of control over it, and then kind of fine-tune the details as you go. But with my clients, when they're tracking their food, if they're one of the clients that tracks their food, I go into their nutrition tracking app. I just kind of use their username and log in. They know I'm doing that, so it's not me being a creeper. But I log in, I look and see what they eat every day, see what their numbers are every day, then give them feedback. And one of the things that comes up that we discuss is just hunger. If they're feeling super duper hungry all day, or if they're not hungry at all, but I need them to eat more food. And it's not necessarily that I need them to eat more food. It's just their goal requires that they eat more food. So, but there often are challenges when it comes to controlling hunger. So what I wanted to do today was just to give 3 basic tips on how you can work to control hunger. And these are things that are kind of some of the first things I'll tell them, and then we usually dive deeper than that. But this is kind of a good starting point for most clients to start to have more control over their hunger levels. So we'll dive into it. The first thing I typically will do, and this always depends on the person. So some clients I won't go in the order I'm about to say because we'll know that the order doesn't necessarily fit their needs or, their preferences or any of these kind of individual details. But in general, one of the first things we can do is to just eat earlier in the day. And I know that I talk about that often. And you'll hear people say, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And it's just we want to get more calories in throughout the beginning of the day. And the reason why then is that your body doesn't feel like it's behind. And if behind in calories. So you're up and active, you're moving, but if the body feels like it's not getting enough energy coming in versus what it's having to output, it's going to start to send you signals that say, hey, I need you to eat more. It needs more at that moment. But you're going to kind of be busy throughout the day, you're not going to do it, and then all of a sudden at the end of the day, the body's going to say, hey, jerk face. I was busy all freaking day, and I was telling you I needed food all day, so I want food. and then you sit down and you eat everything in the kitchen. That is going to happen if you continually kind of like neglect your body all day and you're underfed throughout the day. You might, say at the end of the day, you're like, well, if I don't eat enough during the day, oh well, I'll just eat more in the evening and I'll still meet my 24-hour caloric need. Well, the body doesn't use calories per 24 hours. We tend to just track things per 24 hours because it fits our life, our schedule. Your body uses calories every second of the day, and whether you're sitting down or standing up, it uses more or less calories depending on what you're doing. So your body doesn't think of calories as a 24-hour increment. We only do because that fits our need and our schedule. It's kind of like, I make training programs that often rotate on a 7-day rotation. There's nothing magical about 7 days. It's just that's what we call a week. So if I want somebody to be more, consistent in their training, then I know, okay, if I make their weekly schedule consistent, then that's going to match their lifestyle consistency, with a 7-day week, and then we're going to get more consistency out of programming. But the body doesn't respond to training because of a magical response based on 7 days. That doesn't have anything to do with the body. That has to do with the lifestyle that we make. We decided on 7 days a week, therefore that's what the training programs are. So we decide on tracking calories per 24 hours, but that doesn't mean that that's how the body actually uses calories. Now there's a podcast that'll help you understand this more. It is podcast number 1344. It's a nutrition podcast titled Balancing the Books. That one will help you better understand as to why, if I undereat during the day, I get huge cravings and I tend to overeat at night. So if we're trying to control hunger, cravings are, usually an uncontrollable hunger. We tend to overeat. And that's because we expend a lot of calories during the day. The body doesn't only want to replace those calories, it wants to replace and store up even more to protect itself against the next time that you move and do activity beyond what you're intaking calorie-wise. So it wants to protect itself. The less we make it have to protect itself, like the less we feel it, at risk, then it's gonna worry less and less and less about storing body fat, which is allowing us to get leaner and leaner. So if I eat earlier in the day, my body then has everything it needs, and it doesn't start sending me signals to eat more, eat more, eat more, so that way by the end of the day, I actually won't really have any cravings. In fact, the more of your total calories that you eat earlier in the day, the less and less and less hungry you'll feel at the end of the day. You might actually have to force feed yourself for the last little meal because you're just not hungry for it. So if you take the same amount of calories and you eat as much as you possibly can as early in the day as you can, you'll find that your cravings go down significantly, and that's a very helpful way to control hunger. So that is something you can do. And like somebody might say, well, how much is too much in the morning? Well, if you eat all your daily calories for breakfast and then you don't have anything the rest of the day, that's not ideal. Yeah, you're probably going to have some digestive problems, and it's probably not going to be a very comfortable meal to try to eat. So in general, what I encourage people to do is to at least get to a thirds. Meaning if I'm awake for, say, 16 to 18 hours a day. So we're looking at, if I divide that into thirds, I'm looking at 5 to 6 hour time blocks, something like that. So the first 5 to 6 hours of being awake, I want to eat a third of my calories and a third of my protein. The second 5 to 6 hours of being awake, I want to eat a third of my calories and a third of my protein. Then the final 5 to 6 hours of being awake, I want to eat a third of my calories, a third of my protein. That's a great place to get to. For most people, if you do that, you're going to do very well and you won't have much cravings. You can then modify it more if you want to where you do a quarter, a half and a quarter, where you do a quarter in the first 5 to 6 hours, a half in the middle 5 to 6 hours, and a quarter in the final 5 to 6 hours. And that tends to match most people's activity level. You can also just do a half, quarter. There's tons of ways to break it down, but the thirds, that's a really cool way to do it. Most people do very well with that, and for most people that controls their cravings. So that's one option. Another option we have is to increase our protein intake. Now, we have like an appropriate range that we typically want to be within for protein. That's 0.6 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if I weighed, 200 pounds, I'd have 120 grams of protein up to 200 grams of protein. Now, that's a range. So if I'm having hunger issues and I'm hungry, and I'm like, man, I'm too hungry, I need to slow this hungry down. It's causing me to overeat. It's causing me to eat too fast. I mess up my timing. I just feel antsy all day. You can increase your protein intake. Now, does going above 1 gram per pound of body weight really help you build more muscle? No. Does it curb some hunger levels? Kind of, sort of. But if you start going too far above that, you actually run into really low energy because you're having to take out more carbs and fats to still maintain your proper caloric intake. I did a diet phase one time where I had 40% of my total intake coming from protein. Felt like crap because I was so damn tired all the time because it was too high of percentage of protein where it wasn't giving me enough carbs and fats for energy. I looked better, felt better when I dropped my calories back down closer to 1 gram per pound of body weight, and that gave me a much better kind of balance between my macronutrients. I wasn't hungry when I was at the 40%, so it did help curb hunger, but golly, I had no energy whatsoever. So within the appropriate range of 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of lean body weight, you can kind of play around within that range. So if you're currently only eating 0.6 to 0.8, go up to 1 gram per pound of body weight and see if that helps curb some of the hunger issues. The other thing you can do is to eat more complex proteins. So if you do a lot of shakes like protein powders, if you switch into whole food proteins like meats, for example, they take the most kind of like effort to digest. They're very complex. So if you do that, that can actually help slow the digestion of that meal, which then helps you feel fuller longer after you eat. So that can help you reduce hunger levels. Then we also have the option of increasing protein intake specifically at the meal before you get hungry. So if you get super hungry in the afternoon, then the meal before that, say lunch, you would want to increase your protein intake and see if that helps lessen some of that hunger level at that one singular moment of the day. So that is option number 2. Option number 3 is to play around with fats and carbs. If out of the calories that I have in a day, if I take away the calories that are contributed by protein, the remaining calories I can kind of blend between fats and carbs however I want. If you have more fats or more carbs, it won't really change much about what your weight change would be. It can change how your energy is throughout the day. If you have a bunch of fats right before you work out, you're going to feel like crap. If you have really simple sugars all day, you're going to have huge spikes of energy, then huge drops of energy, and you're going to have way more cravings. So it more so impacts the way you feel during a diet more than it actually impacts the weight differential. Now, if you do increase carbohydrates or you do decrease carbohydrates relatively drastically, that can cause change in body weight, but that's more so related to water retention that comes from carbohydrates. So there's a podcast number 926 is a nutrition podcast titled Controlling Water Retention, and that's a cool one to learn how changing carbohydrate intake changes your body weight, but it doesn't change your body weight based on fat changes. It changes your body weight based on water retention changes. So it's important to know, okay, if I reduce carbs and I lose 4 to 5 pounds, I didn't lose 4 to 5 pounds of fat. I lost 4 to 5 pounds of water. When I reintroduce carbs, if I gain 4 to 5 pounds back, I didn't gain 4 to 5 pounds of fat. I gained back 4 to 5 pounds of water. Now, the water typically gets stored in our muscles, so it actually makes you look good. It's not like a bad water retention, but you can learn more about that in podcast 926. So, how we play around with fats and carbs is out of the percentage of our total caloric intake that would be contributed by fats and carbs. I can play around with the percentage. If I'm having a lot of hunger issues, I can increase the percentage of those calories and favor more towards fats. So I can eat more fat-containing foods. That'll slow my hunger down. But let's say I'm trying to eat a lot of food because I want to gain size. Well, if one of the things that people do that's kind of like a counter-beneficial and it's a mistake and they don't know it, is somebody's like, okay, well, fat has 9 calories per gram, carbs only have 4 calories per gram, and these are averages, but I'm going to get kind of twice as many calories per volume of food with fats as I would with carbs, meaning I don't have to eat as much volume of food, but I can get twice as many calories for that. And somebody might think, okay, well, if I control the volume of food that I have to eat, that helps me not have to eat, quote unquote, as much volume, so therefore I'll be able to eat more food. That seems like it's intelligent, and I thought that when I was younger, but it's not. It doesn't work out that way. Now, there are some benefits to playing around with volumes of food, like caloric density foods, but in general, if you pick a lot of fat-based foods because you're trying to reduce food volume, fats digest very slowly, and that can make you feel very full between your meals. So although you didn't eat a lot of volume, you'll notice, holy crap, I'm not really hungry for my next meal. It's like, man, I'm just struggling to eat as much as I would like to. Well, if you switch to higher carbohydrate percentage and you reduce your fat intake, you might have to eat more volume of food, but you'll notice that food digests much faster and you're hungry for your next meal. So although it seems positive to eat a more calorically dense food, that can actually be negative towards your goal because it reduces your hunger level throughout the day because it slows down digestion. So that's something you can play around with is, if I want to increase my hunger, I would eat more carbs and less fats. If I want to decrease my hunger, I would eat more fats and less carbs. Now, those are just things to play around with. All of these, I'm just going to give you these 3 tips. There's more things that you could do, but these are 3 that overwhelmingly most people will benefit from knowing. Is if I want to control my hunger, control timing. The more I eat, the earlier in the day, the less hungry I'll be throughout the day. I can control my protein intake. The more protein I eat, up to 1 gram per pound of body weight, the less hungry I'll be between meals. The more complex proteins I eat, the less hungry I'll be between meals. And then I have the option to increase my protein intake before the moment I typically get hungry. That can help as well. Then we can play around with fat and carb intake. So again, if you increase fat percentage in your foods, you'll slow your hunger down. If you increase carb percentage in your foods, that'll increase your hunger. Cool. Well, hopefully that was fun. Hopefully that's something you can now play with and kind of experiment with and get the benefit from. If you have any follow-up questions or if you need anything, just email me. My email is brutalironjim@gmail.com. I'm always happy to help. I love feedback. I love interactions. It's very motivating, so thank you very much. If you like today's podcast or the podcast in general, please consider sharing the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people can help. So if the podcast is helping you, allow it to help somebody else as well. Sharing on social media is a great way to reach the most amount of people, but you can even just share in a conversation. That helps as well. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, the people who financially support the podcast. The podcast is well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every single day. And I do greatly appreciate the financial support that we get from monthly donations. It helps to cover some of that cost for the hosting stuff, which I really appreciate. If you want to give to the podcast, you can do so at our website at www.brutalironjim.com. We have an option for a one-time donation, monthly donation, yearly donation. If you donate at all, it's greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. If you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Jim. And if you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything that you want to know, let us know at our email at brutalironjim@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.